From secret federal agreements to explosive clashes in the streets, what's really happening behind the headlines? It began without warning. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, unmarked vans pulled up in quiet Los Angeles neighborhoods. Doors slammed, flashlights flicked on, and just like that, people vanished. No press, no warning, no names released. Word spread fast. ICE was back, and they weren't holding back. Within hours, videos flooded social media showing agents escorting people away in handcuffs while their families screamed from behind police tape. One clip showed a mother gripping her toddler while yelling, "Where are you taking him?" And in a city where over half the residents are immigrants, the fear was immediate and it was real. By noon, the Edward R. Roybal Federal Building was surrounded. What had started as whispers turned into roars. Chants echoed off downtown high-rises. No more raids. Let them go. This is our home. But even as the crowds grew, officials said, nothing. Then the real shock came not from ICE, but from the streets. A sudden clash. A van, speeding toward protesters near Union Station. Screams. Chaos. What sounded like gunfire ripped through the crowd. No one was hit. But the message was clear. This wasn't just a protest anymore. This was the ignition point of something much bigger. What started as a peaceful outcry spiraled into chaos in just 72 hours. Hundreds gathered outside the Edward R. Roybal Federal Building, holding signs, chanting in unison, calling for an end to ICE raids. But as the sun set over downtown Los Angeles, something changed. Tensions flared. Protesters, many of them young, angry, and afraid, formed makeshift barricades using garbage bins, metal chairs, even park benches dragged from Grand Park. Their goal? To block any approach to the federal complex. Then came the order. Unlawful assembly declared. LAPD expanded the zone, now stretching across the entire downtown core, boxing by the 110, 101, 5, and 10 freeways. And just like that, the protest became a standoff. Officers in full riot gear advanced. Lines of mounted police followed behind. What happened next played out on live streams across the world. Officers broke through the barricades. Protesters scrambled. Some fought back. Less lethal rounds were fired. Smoke filled the air. And in the middle of it all, you could hear just one thing. This wasn't just a march in the mall. This was something else. By day 3, the protests weren't just growing, they were morphing. What began as scattered groups turned into a massive, coordinated movement. Marches flowed through downtown like a rising tide, from the federal buildings to LA Live, disrupting the very heartbeat of the city. And then, the police declared war. The LAPD expanded its unlawful assembly declaration, at first covering just the Civic Center. But within hours, the entire downtown core was locked down. From the 110 to the 101, the 5 to the 10, no one was allowed in without risking arrest. And they meant it. Officers in riot gear swept in. Barricades made of trash bins and parked chairs were smashed aside. Less lethal rounds were fired. Mounted units formed intimidating walls of muscle and metal. One video showed protesters running as flashbangs exploded behind them, smoke swallowing the streets. Another showed officers grabbing a protester mid-sentence during a live stream cut to black. But the question burning through social media wasn't just what was happening. It was why. Because at the center of all this chaos was silence. No one from ICE. No names released. No explanation. And now, even city officials were pulling away. Glendale, just 9 miles north, quietly ended its 17-year agreement to house federal immigration detainees. The city said the contract, no matter how limited or carefully managed, had become too divisive. And it insisted, this is not politically driven. It was about trust. But it was clear, trust was already unraveling. And the next move wouldn't come from the city. It would come from the top. At 9:42 p.m., the tone of the protest changed violently. A white van circled near Union Station. Protesters shouted. The van swerved. Once, twice, then gunfire. People scattered. Screams echoed off the concrete. Some claimed the van had fired into the crowd. Others said it was fireworks. No injuries reported, but the fear was real. Moments later, that van slammed into a utility pole. The driver ran. Deputies caught him. But no answers followed. What was he doing there? Who was he? Still unknown. Meanwhile, the protesters weren't backing down. Not after the arrests. Not after the barricades were broken. Not even when the air filled with the toxic stench of burning vehicles. Yes, vehicles were set ablaze. Waymo, the self-driving car company, suspended all rides in the protest zone. Some of their cars had exploded. Others burned to their shells. The smell of scorched lithium and plastic settled over downtown like a warning. And into that chaos stepped the military. President Trump, in a stunning move, federalized 2,000 National Guard troops. Another 500 Marines were put on standby. His message? These weren't protesters. These are insurrectionists, he posted. Paid insurrectionists. He demanded apologies from Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass. But on the streets, no one was paid. No one was coordinated by outside forces. These were teachers, students, veterans, mothers, outraged by immigration raids they believed had crossed a line. And now, they were being treated like enemies of the state. By day 4, the streets were exhausted, and yet they were full. Some had been there since the beginning. Others came after seeing the images. Parents sobbing in front of IC vans. Children clutching signs. A woman kneeling before a line of riot police, holding a Bible. Not a weapon in sight. Downtown Los Angeles was locked in a siege of symbols. The Edward R. Roybal Federal Building Ground Zero for the unrest was now ringed with concrete barriers, razor wire, and flashing floodlights. Above it all, the roar of military helicopters never stopped. We're here just north of Temple Street, and we're witnessing another round of flashbangs. Hold on. Back on the ground, something shifted. Protesters began linking arms. Not running, not retreating. Holding lines against riot shields and mounted patrols. Singing. A woman in hijab started a chant in Arabic. A priest responded in Spanish. A teenage boy beat a rhythm on a plastic bucket. And then, one protester, a young black woman, was shoved to the pavement by an armored officer. It was caught on 10 different phones. Within an hour, it was on 1,000 screens. By midnight, it had 1 million views. Her name was Maya Douglas, 23 years old, UCLA graduate, daughter of a Haitian immigrant. Her forehead split on the curb. Her blood spilled on the same streets her father had walked 30 years earlier, chasing the American dream. That moment broke something open, not just in Los Angeles, but everywhere. In San Francisco, in Phoenix, in Atlanta, even in Des Moines, Iowa marches began gathering. They weren't just protesting immigration raids anymore. They were protesting what those raids represented. Control. Fear. A government turning its eyes inward and seeing enemies. As helicopters circled downtown Los Angeles, inside courtrooms, the real battle was just beginning. Civil liberties attorneys, immigration advocates, and even city officials had started filing emergency injunctions, one after another. This is not about party lines. One federal judge said from the bench, this is about the Constitution. By the end of the day, 3 key legal challenges had been launched. 1. A federal class-action lawsuit claiming unlawful detention of immigrants, including U.S. citizens mistakenly targeted. 2. A petition to block the deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles, arguing the president overstepped constitutional limits. 3. A subpoena to Homeland Security for surveillance footage from the Roybal Detention Center. It wasn't just lawyers. City council members in San Diego, Oakland, and San Jose passed emergency resolutions rejecting federal cooperation. Even Glendale, home to a long-standing ICE contract, pulled out saying, this partnership has become a liability, not a service. It doesn't matter how limited it was. Our residents no longer trust a badge when it warmed beside a cage. But not everyone backed away. In Washington, D.C., the rhetoric only grew sharper. From the Oval Office, President Trump doubled down. On his platform, Truth Social, he posted, judges can't stop me. The people want order. They want ICE. They want strength. And then, later, if California won't handle it, I will. Watch what happens next. Sources within the Pentagon confirmed that 500 Marines had been placed on standby, a first since the 1968 riots. The message was clear. This wasn't just about immigration anymore. As a nation watched courtrooms debate law and executive power, outside, the people were already answering a different question. What do you do when the rules don't protect you anymore? By the morning of the fourth day, it wasn't just an American crisis anymore. It had become a global reckoning. From Mexico City to Berlin, Istanbul to Toronto, people poured into the streets. Placards in Spanish read, "No son ilegales, son humanos." They are not illegal, they are human. In front of the U.S. Embassy in Paris, protesters chained themselves to the gates. A banner read, "America, land of the free," with the word free slashed through in red. Several countries have issued travel advisory for Los Angeles as protests intensify and civil unrest spreads across California. The United Nations has called for an investigation into the use of force against demonstrators. In Geneva, a special session of the UN Human Rights Council was convened. It marked the first time in over a decade that the U.S. had been the subject of an emergency resolution. Ambassadors from Norway, South Africa, and Pakistan demanded accountability. But the most piercing blow came from America's closest ally. "We must be honest," said one British MP. "We are watching the United States, once a global symbol of democracy, use military force on its own citizens protesting for human rights." The State Department scrambled. Press secretaries deflected, and the White House ignored it all. Back home, the official narrative had shifted. Foreign governments have no say in our sovereignty. No country tells America how to secure its borders. Period. But for millions watching the images of tear gas wafting through Grand Park, of armored trucks on Figueroa Street, of burning driverless cars near Union Station, it no longer mattered what officials said. The image of America had changed, and no press release could fix it. The fires eventually died down, not because they were put out, but because people stopped throwing matches. By day 5, much of downtown Los Angeles was reduced to debris and barricades. The Roybal Federal Building was fenced off with barbed wire. Charred driverless cars sat like tombstones along Temple Street. But something unexpected began to bloom in the ashes. In Lincoln Heights, volunteers served food to exhausted protesters. In Westlake, students held vigil for the detained, candles shaping the outline of California. And in Boyle Heights, a woman named Celeste Morales, a 27-year-old teacher whose cousin had been taken in the raids, stepped forward with a microphone. "They call us agitators. I call us survivors. They call it unlawful assembly. I call it family. We are not backing down because we never had the privilege of comfort in the first place." The clip went viral, and overnight, Celeste Morales became a name known across the country. From Detroit to Houston, similar voices rose up. Teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, the kind of people America rarely notices until they refuse to be quiet. A hashtag took over. It wasn't just about immigration anymore. It was about belonging, about who gets to feel safe, who gets to be heard. A new coalition of civil rights groups has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security and the City of Los Angeles, calling the raids unconstitutional and a violation of due process. As the National Guard began to retreat, as federal agents returned to Washington under pressure, one truth echoed through the cracked streets of Los Angeles. The people never left.
So here, this is because, these things need to be documented. This is what they wanted. They wanted people to riot. They wanted the people to start fireworks. They wanted the people to start burning out. Why? Because this is the effect. So they can make us look bad. So they can make us seem that we're the ones causing this, that we started it.